Something big is happening, and for millions of Social Security beneficiaries across the country, this could be the kind of news you've been waiting to hear for years. We're talking about a proposal that's gaining serious traction right now, a dedicated $1,400 payment that would go straight into the pockets of Social Security recipients. Not a vague promise, not a maybe someday idea, but an actual proposal being discussed by one of the most vocal advocacy groups for seniors in the entire nation. And I've got to tell you, this one has me fired up because this is exactly the kind of thing I've been pushing for, arguing for, practically pounding the table for the last 5.5 years. A check dedicated only to those on Social Security, separate from your regular benefits, not lumped in with some broad stimulus for the general public, but meant specifically for you. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. We've heard rumors like this before. We've seen headlines promising big payments that never seem to arrive. And believe me, I get it, skepticism is healthy when you've been let down time and time again. But here's why this feels different. This isn't just a social media rumor or some random blog post. This is being championed by the Senior Citizens League, a real, established organization with a long history of advocating for Social Security beneficiaries. And they're not talking about some vague long-term plan. They're calling for what they describe as a catch-up payment, a way to make up for the years of shortchanging that have left retirees, disabled Americans, and others who depend on Social Security struggling to keep up with the real cost of living. Let's take a step back for a second. If you've been living on Social Security these last few years, you already know the truth. The cost of living adjustments, the so-called COLAs, have been completely out of sync with the actual inflation you face. On paper, it might look like you've been getting increases. But in reality, those increases barely scratch the surface of what you're paying extra at the grocery store, at the gas pump, in your utility bills. And that's before we even talk about other costs that seem to climb every single year, taking bigger and bigger bites out of your fixed income. Over the last 5 years, the official COLA numbers have added up to just over 20% total. That might sound decent until you compare it to what's actually happened in the real world. The real cost of living, the day-to-day expenses for food, housing, transportation, healthcare, everything you actually use has gone up by 25%, 30%, even 40% or more in certain areas. It's like running a race where the finish line keeps moving faster than you can possibly keep up. And no matter how hard you try, you're always just a few steps behind. Now, imagine this. After years of being told to tighten your belt and make do, someone finally says, you know what? We owe you. We've been underpaying you for years, and it's time to make things right. That's exactly the spirit behind this proposed $1,400 payment. It's not charity, it's not a handout, it's a recognition that the system has fallen short, and that millions of people have been squeezed because of it. And here's where it gets really interesting. This wouldn't be the first time something like this has happened. If you remember back in 2009, during the aftermath of the deep recession, the federal government actually did send out a dedicated payment just to Social Security beneficiaries. That payment was $250. Now, sure, $250 might not sound like much compared to what's being proposed now, but back then it was a real lifeline for a lot of people. And more importantly, it set a precedent. It proved that targeted payments to Social Security recipients are possible. The idea isn't new, it's been done before. Which means it can absolutely be done again. What the Senior Citizens League is proposing now takes that same concept but brings it into today's reality. Instead of $250, they're calling for $1,400, a number that, for many people, could mean paying off overdue bills, catching up on essentials, or simply breathing a little easier for the first time in months. It's about relief. It's about fairness. It's about acknowledging the gap between what you've been given and what you've actually needed to survive. And I can't help but get fired up about this, because this is exactly what I've been saying for years. Over and over again, I've sent letters to lawmakers, to committees, to anyone in Washington who might listen. Letters calling for one-time checks, for monthly stipends, for quarterly payments, for literally any form of meaningful financial relief targeted specifically to Social Security beneficiaries. I've been saying it for so long that I've lost count of how many times I've made the argument. And now, to see a major advocacy group step forward and echo that same message? It's a big deal. Now, there's an important detail in all this, and it's something I think we need to get right from the start. The Senior Citizens League's proposal suggests having Social Security itself distribute the $1,400 payment. But here's the thing: if that money comes directly out of the Social Security Trust Fund, it could speed up the insolvency of the program. And I think that would be a mistake. We all know the trust fund already faces long-term challenges. The last thing we need is to weaken it further by draining it for a one-time payment, no matter how good that payment would feel in the short term. The smarter approach, in my opinion, would be to have the federal government fund this payment through the Treasury the same way they funded the stimulus checks we saw in recent years. That way, the payment still reaches every eligible Social Security recipient, but it doesn't take a single penny away from the trust fund. The Social Security program stays intact, and people still get the relief they desperately need. In other words, we can have both financial relief now and a more secure program for the future. Think about what $1,400 could mean for you right now. Maybe it's paying off the last of that credit card balance that's been hanging over your head. Maybe it's finally getting the dental work you've been putting off because Medicare doesn't cover it. Maybe it's filling your pantry so you don't have to worry about how you'll afford groceries next month. Maybe it's simply the peace of mind of having a cushion in your bank account for once, instead of watching the numbers drop lower and lower each month. For millions of people, that's the difference between constant stress and a little breathing room. And when you're living on a fixed income, breathing room is priceless. Now, I'm not naive. I know that proposals like this face an uphill battle. There will be debates, there will be political arguments, there will be people who say it costs too much or sets the wrong precedent. But here's what I also know: change doesn't happen unless people speak up. The more noise we make, the more attention this proposal gets, the harder it will be for lawmakers to ignore it. The Senior Citizens League is already doing their part by pushing it into the public conversation. Now it's on us, the people who would actually benefit, to make sure our voices are heard. And I have to say, there's something incredibly validating about this moment. After years of feeling like our needs were being pushed to the bottom of the priority list, here's a concrete proposal that says, you matter. Your struggles are real. And you deserve better. It's about more than just the money though, let's be honest, the money would help a lot. It's about being seen. It's about being recognized. It's about saying that seniors and disabled Americans are not invisible, not expendable, and not just numbers on a spreadsheet. I think back to the stories I've heard from so many people over the years: people deciding between buying medicine and buying food, people skipping meals so they can afford their prescriptions, people sitting in cold houses in the winter because turning up the heat costs too much. These aren't luxuries we're talking about. These are basic human needs. And in a country as wealthy as ours, nobody who has worked their whole life or who is living with a disability should have to make choices like that. That's why I get so fired up about this $1,400 proposal. It's not going to solve every problem. It's not a magic wand. But it's a start. It's a step in the right direction. And it's proof that with enough pressure, enough advocacy, enough persistence, ideas like this can make it into the national conversation. I want to be clear, this is not a done deal. There's no guarantee this payment will happen. But the fact that it's being discussed, the fact that it's being pushed by a major advocacy group, the fact that it mirrors ideas that have already been implemented in the past, those are all signs that it's worth fighting for. So here's what I'd say to anyone listening right now: pay attention to this. Talk about it. Share the information with your friends, your family, your neighbors. Let people know that this is on the table. The more people know, the more momentum we build. And momentum is everything in situations like this. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about $1,400. It's about dignity. It's about fairness. It's about making sure that the people who built this country, who worked and contributed and paid into the system for decades, aren't left struggling to survive in their later years. It's about saying that the promise of Social Security still means something, that it's not just a line item in a budget, but a lifeline for real human beings. And I'll say this: if the Senior Citizens League is willing to push this proposal, I'm going to stand right there with them. I've been fighting for exactly this kind of targeted relief for years, and I'm not about to stop now. I don't care if it's called a catch-up payment, a make-up payment, a one-time stipend, or a targeted stimulus. Call it whatever you want, just make it happen. Because here's the reality, people are hurting now. Costs are high now. The need is urgent now. And if Washington can move mountains when it comes to funding other priorities, then they can certainly find a way to deliver $1,400 to the people who need it most. We've been patient. We've been understanding. We've waited through promises and half measures and endless debates. But patience has its limits. And I think we're past that point. It's time for action. It's time to recognize that seniors and disabled Americans have been carrying an unfair burden for too long. It's time to do something real. So here's my promise: I'm going to keep talking about this. I'm going to keep pushing for it. I'm going to keep reminding anyone who will listen that this is not just a nice idea, it's a necessary one. And I hope you'll join me. Because together, our voices are louder. And together, we just might turn this proposal into reality.